What does the Master Jesus, Jupiter Zeus, teach about this, money? He teaches that the love of this money is the root of all evil. The money, or the monai, the one eye of the day's eye of God, God's Son in the sky, the eye in the sky, Graham Parsons Project. Seriously, the white star line of the Titanic and the Olympian, of credit. So we have a credit system of money. God, in God we trust. What do you have to have in God? Belief. This is what credit is. It's belief. It's from creed or credo, and I'm going to show you that in Edym Online on etymonline.com this morning. The etymology source online. Word origins. In addition, this morning, to reading Carl Jung's The Undiscovered Self, Chapter 3. Before I go to Edym Online, I'm going to read to you. Well, let's do the quotes first. From Stamp, Josephiah Stamp.
Conventillo y en el barrio sur. No la llames diosa, déjala en mujer que trabaja todo el día y al anochecer. Al compás de la llamada baila el candombe. Baila el candombe.
This is from Sir Josiah Stamp, Director and President of the Bank of England during the 1920s. The modern banking system, remember, the Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913, which gave us this Federal Reserve system of Federal Reserve notes. Federal Reserve here, you'll notice, is situated above the United States of America because it owns the United States of America and it is not part of the federal government, just because the word federal's there. You wouldn't think Federal Express is part of the federal government, would you? It's called federal, but they're not part of the federal government, right? They're not part of the executive, judicial, or legislative branches of the trees, of the wings, of the parties, of the bird. See, there's the one that controls these two wings. Just like here. This is what a predator. Predator. This club that owns the Fed is disconnected from the rest of humanity who are below them, the bricks that they prey upon, the birds of prey. Predators. Prey and prey. The one who gives his life so that the rest of the herd may live. The bricks, stuck in place economically. Con game of game bullying. hitting the bullseye, the target of Taurus. From Sir Josiah Stamp, director and president of the Bank of England during the 1920s. The modern banking system manufactures money out of nothing. The process is perhaps the most astounding piece of sleight of hand that was ever invented. Banking was conceived in iniquity and born in sin. Bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create money and control credit, and with the flick of a pen they will create enough money to buy it back again. So remember, in the part where Jesus says the love of money is the root of all evil in Matthew, chapter 6, right? Same chapter where he says, when the eye is single, the body is filled with light. The one eye in the green of the tree, of the brain tree, of the three, of the 1, 2, 3, of the one eye that's the third eye in the mid-L, the pineal gland, the pine cone in the pine tree, of the trunk, of the S-pine, the spine. The one eye in the sky, the daisy, the day's eye, God's eye in the sky, looking at you, reading your mind. Also, he said, and when he says that the love of money is the root of all evil, he says you cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve God. You cannot serve God and money simultaneously, because you will either love one and serve it over the other. These are opposed, he's telling you, God and money. So what's God doing here on the money, or the mono eye? The eye alone. So he says, bankers own the earth. Remember, this is the director and president of the Bank of England during the 1920s. Bankers own the earth, take it away from them, but leave them the power to create money and control credit, and with the flick of a pen they will create enough money to buy it back again. Take this great power away from the bankers and all the great fortunes like mine will disappear, and they ought to disappear. For this would be a better and happier world to live in. But if you wish to remain the slaves of bankers and pay the cost of your own slavery, let them continue to create money and to what? Control credit. Let's look now at what we're actually dealing with the word credit. Why is it credit? Why do you have credit cards? etymonline.com, www.etymonline.com/indx.php (term equals credit). Noun, credit. etymonline.com. Noun, credit. 1540s. Belief, faith. From Middle French crédit, 15th century. Belief, trust. From Italian credito, from Latin creditum. Quote, a loan, thing entrusted to another. Neuter past participle of credere, to trust. Entrust, believe. See what? Credo, in big bold letters, the link to credo. Then the commercial sense of confidence in the, quote, confidence in the ability and intention of a purchaser or borrower to make payment at some future time, unquote, was in English by 1570s. Creditor in middle 15th century. In the mid-1400s, you get creditor, and that's in bold letters linked here too, to the etymology of creditor. You have credo, creditor, hence, quote, sum placed at a person's disposal by a bank, etc., 1660s. from 1580s as, quote, one who or that which brings honor or reputation to, meaning, quote, honor, acknowledgement of merit, is from 1600. Academic sense of point, quote, point awarded for completing a course of study, academic credit, is by 1904. Short for hour of credit, 1892, given for satisfactory completion of one lecture, etc., a week, usually 1 hour in length. Don't forget about the hours, plural of hour, H-O-U-R, the silent H, the 8th letter of holy, and whole, and hope, and home, H-ohm, 8-ohm. Well, that's anagrammatic hours with Horus, and that's his eye. The eye in the sky, the daisy, the day's eye, of the flower, of the phallus pointing up, of the father, the blade, of with the chalice is the triangle that points down, the cup, the feminine, 9 o'clock position of the west line of the waist, of Libra, the hips, of balance, of the September separation, balance, belief. Movie broadcasting sense, quote, acknowledgement and naming of the individual contributors, in plural, credits, the credits, roll the credits, is by 1914 in cinema, ma. Credit rating is from 1958, and we're going to continue reading Jung's 1958, The Undiscovered Self. Credit union, quote, cooperative banking society, is 1881, American English. Credit verb, 1540s, to believe, to be sure of the truth of, from credit, in a looser sense to attribute, give as the cause of, 1850, meaning to enter upon the credit side of an account, is from 1680s. Related, credited, crediting. Related entries, so the Proto-Indo-European root is K-E-R-D. Then you have all these linked words: accredit, cred, creditable, credit card, creditor, credo, discredit, miscredit, uncredited. And then all of these words which are part of the same Proto-Indo-European root family: credential, credence, credenza, credibility, credible, believable, belief, credit, faith, credentials, creditable, credit card, creditor, credo, credulity, incredible, means unbelievable. And look at the word believe, B-E-L-I-E, like belie, be-lie, and eve, the lie of the eye, of evening, and dawn, the dawn of Adam and the evening of Eve, the on of Adam of sunrise, and sunset, evening, Set and Horus, holy, whole, of the masculine and feminine, of the linear and cyclical, the cycle on the horizon line of Horus, rising at Aries, at 3, at the tree, of the body, or soma, of the mud, of the primal material, and then the mature ripening after the rising, and then the setting, sitting, complete, total, wholly whole, of 12 to 6 of the three-dimensional universe, of up, down, north, south, right, left, east, west, 3, 9, 6 between the axis, A6 of the basics, up, down, left, right, east, west, and then front and back. 2, 4, 6 of the base 6 of 6 o'clock of the 3D universe of the poles of bipolar. Is that not redundant? Bipolar. Your diagnoses, psychiatric establishment, drug pushers, pill pushers. Yes, bipolar. That's redundant because pole is referring to the bi of the corresponding halves of the quarters, the quartors of Taurus, of the torso, of the yearly cycle of nature, not Torah, of the Torah and the Bible, of the descent, decline, decay, downward sun, and the upward rising resurrection building of the bull sun, of the Masons, of Beltane, of belief, of the creeds, of credit, credo. Let's look at all of these words in falling under credo here. See credo. Credence, credential, credentials, credible, credit, creditor, credulity, credulous, creed, creed. Why do you think you have the word creed? Like Apollo Creed, the Apocalypse, Apollo Eclipse Creed of Rocky. Credo, early 13th century. The creed in the church service, from Latin credo, I believe. The first word of the Apostles' and Nicene creeds. And we just learned in chapter 2 of Carl Jung's The Undiscovered Self that Jung draws a distinction between a religion and a creed. Creed being a belief, and religion being a 24/7 practice. Creed being just an adopted belief of just something that's almost, it's people just give lip service to the religion instead of actually internalizing it and living it. And it's basically the difference between someone who's a church goer and who goes once a week and wants to just be part, is just a joiner, right? And someone who is all about their faith all the time and who actually does seek communion with God, not just giving lip service to the belief. The first word of the Apostles' and Nicene creeds, first person singular present indicative of credere, to believe, from Proto-Indo-European compound kerd-de, K-E-R-D-D-H-E, to believe, literally, to put one's heart, source also of Old Irish cretem, Irish credim, Welsh credu, I believe, Sanskrit, sraddha, faith, confidence, devotion. From Proto-Indo-European root, kurd, roots, trees, threes. K-E-R-D, the Proto-Indo-European root, K-E-R-D, which means literally heart, which is anagrammatic with earth, equaling 52 in English gematria, the number of weeks in a whole year. 26 of the D, 26 of the Re, 52. Earth and heart equal 52. Now equals 52. This is all about the sun's sine wave serpentine rise and set on the equator of Earth, or the heart, the center of the centaurs, of the bullseye, the target, Torget of Taurus, the bull god of the torso, of the cerebellum, of Bel, Baal, of Kabbalah, Capricorn of the kneecaps. The nativized form is creed. General sense of formula or statement of belief is from 1580s. So there you go. Credit system is the belief system. This is why in God we trust, of the mono eye, the one eye, of the owl of El here on the front with those two eyes, and the beak. The owl hidden up here that you need a magnifying glass to see, and the eagle, El. These are birds of prey that sit above, perched above, and prey on the weak below, who believe. These ones control the belief, the credit. The creditor predators. Predator drones. Now let's do chapter 3 of Jung's The Undiscovered Self. Undiscovered Self PDF. Also available as a printed book. See title verso for ISBN details. We're going to go to chapter 3. We've read chapters 1 and 2 and part of chapter 6. Bear with me here a second. I got to turn a lot of pages here, virtual pages. And it's a little awkward. Okay, chapter 3, the position of the West on the question of religion. Confronting this development in the 20th century, remember this is published 1958, I believe it said that he wrote it in 56. Confronting this development in the 20th century of our Christian era, the Western world stands with its heritage of Roman law, the treasures of Judeo-Christian ethics grounded on metaphysics, and its ideal of the inalienable rights of man. Anxiously it asks itself the question, how can this development be brought to a standstill or put into reverse? It is useless to pillory the socialist dictatorship as utopian and to condemn its economic principles as unreasonable because, in the first place, the criticizing West has only itself to talk to, its arguments being heard only on this side of the Iron Curtain, and in the second place, any economic principles you like can be put into practice so long as you are prepared to accept the sacrifices they entail. You can carry through any social and economic reforms you please if, like Stalin, you let 3 million peasants starve to death and have a few million unpaid laborers at your disposal. A state of this kind has no social or economic crises to fear, so long as its power is intact. That is to say, so long as there is a well-principled and well-fed police army in the offing, it can maintain its existence for an indefinitely long period and can go on increasing its power to indefinite extent. In accordance with its excess birth rate, it can raise the number of its unpaid workers almost at will in order to compete with its rivals regardless of the world market, which is to a large measure dependent on wages. A real danger can come to it only from outside, through the threat of military attack, but this risk grows less every year, firstly because the war potential of the dictator states is steadily increasing, and secondly because the West cannot afford to arouse latent Russian or Chinese nationalism and chauvinism by an attack which would divert their well-meant undertakings into a hopelessly wrong channel. So far as one can see, only one possibility remains, and that is a breakdown of power from within, which must, however, be left to follow its own inner development. Any support from outside at present would have little effect, in view of the existing security measures and the danger of nationalistic reactions. The absolute state has an army of financial missionaries to do its bidding in matters of foreign policy, and these, in their turn, can count on a fifth column who are guaranteed asylum under the laws and constitution of the Western states. In addition, the communes of believers, very strong in places, considerably weaken Western government's powers of decision, whereas the West has no opportunity to exert a similar influence on our rivals. Though we are probably not wrong in surmising that there is a certain amount of opposition among the masses in the East. There are always upright and truth-loving people to whom lying and tyranny are hateful, but one cannot judge whether they exert any decisive influence on the masses under the police regimes. And there's a footnote here. Recent events in Poland and Hungary have shown that this opposition is more considerable than could have been foreseen. In view of this uncomfortable situation, the question is heard again and again in the West: what can we do to counter this threat from the East? Even though the West has considerable industrial power and a sizable defense potential at its command, we cannot rest content with this, for we know that even the biggest guns and the heaviest industry, with its relatively high living standard, are not enough to check the psychic infection spread by religious fanaticism. The West has unfortunately not yet awakened to the fact that our appeal to idealism and reason and other desirable virtues, delivered with so much enthusiasm, is mere sound and fury. It is a puff of wind swept away in the storm of religious faith, however twisted this faith may appear to us. We are faced not with a situation that can be overcome by rational or moral arguments, but with an unleashing of emotional forces and ideas engendered by the spirit of the times, and these, as we know from experience, are not much influenced by rational reflection and still less by moral exhortation. It has been correctly realized in many quarters that the alexipharmic, the antidote, should in this case be an equally potent faith of a different and non-materialistic kind, and that the religious attitude grounded upon it would be the only effective defense against the danger of psychic infection. Unhappily, the little word should, which never fails to appear in this connection, points to a certain weakness, if not the absence of this desideratum. Not only does the West lack a uniform faith that could block the progress of a fanatical ideology, but as the father of Marxist philosophy, it makes use of exactly the same spiritual assumptions, the same arguments and aims. Although the churches in the West enjoy full freedom, they are not less full or empty than in the East. Yet they exercise no noticeable influence on the broad course of politics. The disadvantage of a creed as a public institution is that it serves two masters. On the one hand, It derives its existence from the relationship of man to God, and on the other hand, it owes a duty to the state, i.e., to the world, in which connection it can appeal to the saying, quote, "Render unto Caesar," unquote, and various other admonitions in the New Testament. In early times and until comparatively recently, there was therefore talk of, quote, "powers ordained by God," unquote, Romans 13, chapter 13, verse 1. Today, this conception is antiquated. The churches stand for traditional and collective convictions which, in the case of many of their adherents, are no longer based on their own inner experience, but on unreflecting belief, which is notoriously apt to disappear as soon as one begins thinking about it. The content of belief then comes into collision with knowledge, and it often turns out that the irrationality of the former is no match for the ratiocinations of the latter. Belief is no adequate substitute for inner experience. And where this is absent, even a strong faith, which came miraculously as a gift of grace, may depart equally miraculously. People call faith the true religious experience, but they do not stop to think that actually it is a secondary phenomenon arising from the fact that something happened to us in the first place, which instilled the faith into us, that is, trust and loyalty. This experience has a definite content that can be interpreted in terms of one or other of the denominational creeds. But the more this is so, the more the possibilities of these conflicts with knowledge mount up, which in themselves are quite pointless. That is to say, the standpoint of the creeds is archaic. They are full of impressive mythological symbolism which, if taken literally, comes into insufferable conflict with knowledge. But if, for instance, the statement that Christ rose from the dead is to be understood not literally but symbolically, then it is capable of various interpretations that do not collide with knowledge and do not impair the meaning of the statement. The objection that understanding is symbolically put, the objection that understanding it symbolically puts an end to the Christian's hope of immortality is invalid, because long before the coming of Christianity, mankind believed in a life after death, and therefore had no need of the Easter event as a guarantee of immortality. The danger that a mythology, understood too literally, and as taught by the Church, will suddenly be repudiated lock, stock, and barrel, is today greater than ever. It is not time that the Christian mythology, instead of being wiped out, was understood symbolically for once? This is why I thank God that I encountered this when I did at the age of 19. This is what got me to start thinking that I was throwing the baby out with the bathwater by being atheistic at that point. I'm not going to go into my personal background right now. I'm just going to keep reading this. I love how he says that, though. Let's read that sentence one more time. Is it not time that the Christian mythology, instead of being wiped out, was understood symbolically for once? It is still too early to say what might be the consequences of a general recognition of the fatal parallelism between the state religion of the Marxists and the state religion of the Church. The absolutist claim of a civitas Dei represented by man bears an unfortunate resemblance to the quote-unquote divinity of the state, and the moral conclusion drawn by Ignatius Loyola from the authority of the Church, the, quote, the end sacrifices the means, unquote, anticipates the lie as a political instrument in an exceedingly dangerous way. Both demand unqualified submission to faith and thus curtail man's freedom. The one, his freedom before God, and the other, his freedom before the state, thereby digging the grave for the individual. The fragile existence of the individual, the unique carrier of life, in other words, you, is threatened on both sides, despite their respective promises of spiritual and material idols to come. And how many of us can, in the long run, fight against the proverbial wisdom of, quote, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, unquote. Besides which, the West cherishes the same scientific and rationalistic Weltanschauung with its statistical leveling down tendency and materialistic aims as the state religion of the Eastern Bloc, as I have explained above. What then has the West, with its political and denominational schisms, to offer to modern man in his need? Nothing, unfortunately, except a variety of paths, all leading to one goal, which is practically indistinguishable from the Marxist ideal. It requires no special effort of understanding to see where the communist ideology gets the certainty of its belief that time is on its side and that the world is ripe for conversion. The facts speak a language that is all too plain in this respect. It will not help us in the West to shut our eyes to this and not recognize our fatal vulnerability. Anyone who has once learned to submit absolutely to a collective belief and to renounce his eternal right to freedom and the equally eternal duty of individual responsibility will persist in this attitude and will be able to set out with the same credulity and the same lack of criticism in the reverse direction if another and manifestly better belief is foisted upon his alleged idealism. What happened not so long ago to a civilized European nation? We accuse the Germans of having forgotten it all again already, but the truth is that we don't know for certain whether something similar might not happen elsewhere. It would not be surprising if it did, and if another civilized nation succumbed to the infection of a uniform and one-sided idea. America, which, o quo maturio rerum, forms the real political backbone of Western Europe, seems to be immune because of the outspoken counterposition she has adopted. But in point of fact, she is perhaps even more vulnerable than Europe. Since her educational system is the most influenced by the scientific Weltanschauung, with its statistical truths, and her mixed population finds it difficult to strike roots in a soil that is practically without history. The historical and humanistic type of education so sorely needed in such circumstances leads, on the contrary, a Cinderella existence. Though Europe possesses this latter requirement, she uses it to her own undoing in the form of nationalistic egoisms and paralyzing skepticism. Common to both is the materialistic and collectivist goal, and both lack the very thing that expresses and grips the whole man, namely, an idea which puts the individual human being in the center as the measure of all things. This idea alone is enough to arouse the most violent doubts and resistances on all sides, and one could almost go so far as to assert that the valuelessness of the individual in comparison with large numbers is the one belief that meets with universal and unanimous assent. To be sure, we all say that this is the century of the common man, that he is the Lord of the earth, the air, and the water, and that on his decision hangs the historical fate of the nations. This proud picture of human grandeur is unfortunately an illusion only, and is counterbalanced by a reality which is very different. In this reality, man is the slave and victim of the machines that have conquered space and time for him. He is intimidated and endangered by the might of the war technique which is supposed to safeguard his physical existence. His spiritual and moral freedom, though guaranteed within limits in one half of his world, is threatened with chaotic disorientation, and in the other half it is abolished altogether. Finally, to add comedy to tragedy, this lord of the elements, this universal arbiter, hugs to his bosom notions which stamp his dignity as worthless and turn his autonomy into an absurdity. All his achievements and possessions do not make him bigger. On the contrary, they diminish him, as the fate of the factory worker under the rule of a just distribution of goods clearly demonstrates.